A very warm welcome to this Q&A format video, question and answers, so that we cover as much ground as possible. And I warmly welcome you to send in your questions using the email address you see on your screens right now, or our Telegram forum, and I will do my best to answer them here as quickly as possible. Of course, that beats you waiting and waiting for me to cover a certain topic that you're interested in. And so I'm very sure a majority of us will be very delighted at this particular format for this video. Let's get to it. Twende kazi. Chris, you keep on predicting that by such and such a date, Ruto will be gone. But Ruto is still here. I am not one of those people who bash you. I just want to know, when is this man going? Thank you for your question. Now, I'm human and sometimes I make a mistake. But I think there's also a lot of confusion because a lot of us take in a lot of content from different people, different sources. There was a man of cloth who predicted the exact date when Ruto was supposed to go. It didn't happen. That was not me. But having said that, it is also very true that I did not expect the Ruto presidency to cross over to this year, 2025, which now is about to end and is still in power. I was wrong. However, like everything else on this channel, it was based on analysis. And you will remember the time I said I did not expect him to reach this year. The broad-based government, the union with the Raila and ODM, had not yet happened. Most analysts, including myself, are convinced that the late Raila coming into play prolonged the Ruto administration. But let me try and answer the question based on the factors on the ground right now. When will the Ruto administration end? Will it arrive at the 2027 general elections? Okay, I will start with the latter part of that question. In my opinion, and based on the information I have at this very moment, it is highly unlikely that this administration will see the 2027, the scheduled 2027 general elections. In fact, the factors on the ground suggest that there is a high possibility that there will be no election in 2027. But at this very moment, I cannot predict, even approximately, when the Ruto presidency will end, because there are a lot of new factors which have come in, which could greatly speed up his exit from power. So much so that I have a feeling it could very easily happen very suddenly, very unexpectedly, without any warning. Which factors are these? What is happening in our neighboring countries, and especially Tanzania? It impacts us greatly. If you've been following my other videos, you will know exactly how, especially my recent videos. Secondly, his massive support, indeed the people who made him president in the Western world, powerful forces in the Western world, have very suddenly started a campaign against the Ruto presidency. And this is most visible in people spending money to do some serious research, which has led to mind-blowing exposés about the president's private business dealings. Many of you will understand immediately that I'm referring to the article in a respectable, very authoritative newspaper in the United States, read by decision makers, which revealed the ownership of the companies sending Kenyans to the Gulf to work. In fact, the headline had the words, modern slavery on it. Now, this one tells us very clearly that it is indeed true that Ruto has lost support of the influential group that played the biggest role in enabling him to be president. Chris, will the by-elections be rigged? Thank you for that question. We're expecting some by-elections this Thursday, and I'm trying my best to avoid answering that question with the usual overused yes and no. Let me be more direct and therefore allow me to go deeper. In my opinion, if there's going to be any rigging, it is going to be very minimal. Why? Because for starters, a by-election is very different from a general election. And those differences make rigging that much harder. And let us start with the most important factor. How are general elections in Kenya rigged? Answer: they are rigged during the transmission process. In other words, the results that are presented at the tallying center at Bomas are usually very different from the actual results at the polling station on the ground in that constituency. Indeed, that tallying center even presents results from non-existent polling stations. That does not apply to these by-elections. Even if the results are announced from the IEBC offices in Nairobi, it does not apply. Why? The tallying center trick works because there are tens of thousands of polling stations countrywide. In the case of these by-elections, there are just a few constituencies, and you can be sure that the very eager contestants to cover all their bases, to cover all the individual polling stations. And the people on the ground, of course, are very focused on their candidate, as opposed to a situation where there's a presidential candidate involved. You know, even the state treats presidential election results different, misirikali. Unfortunately, in many cases, it is classified presidential election results on the ground. And there is a lot of bullying by the state and state agents over this, which muddies the waters. That factor is not at play here in the by-elections. Even the other rigging games that can be applied on the ground are going to face a lot of difficulty. Let me explain. In a general election, there's usually a lot of different emotions flying in the air for different presidential candidates. Okay? By the way, emotions are what win elections, not the agenda of the candidate, in case you didn't know. And this happens the world over. And that is why I was amused the other day when somebody complained that in these campaigns, people are talking less about the agenda and more about personalities and other things that tend to generate the emotions of the people. That is politics for you. That's the truth. For instance, in case you didn't know, it takes a lot of emotions for an individual to leave what they're doing and join the queue to cast their vote. Worldwide, by the way, not just in Kenya. Usually, they have to be very much in love with a certain candidate, or they have to be very angry about something for this to happen. Usually being very angry is more effective. Yeah, for somebody who wants to win an election and can be able to generate anger against the opponent to get people to turn up and vote for them. That is always a winning strategy. Now, this is super relevant in these by-elections because tricks like waiting for people and bribing them to vote in a different way on voting day are less likely to work. Why? Because the people have a lot of anger in them towards the government and any candidate the government can produce. And I think we all know why. Let me remind you of the very famous by-election in Embakasi, where a candidate known as Mwathe won a by-election simply by generating enough anger against the then government of Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and Raila Amolo Odinga, who was working with that government. That was enough, although there were dirty tricks applied. That was enough for Mwathe, with Ruto's help, to win that by-election. Against state machinery and against any rigging that somebody would have tried using state kifua. That is going to be the mood across all the by-elections. Okay? And that is why I have not been surprised at all at the way the remote-controlled IEBC has dealt with independent candidates in those elections right across the board. Life has been made very difficult for them, okay? And not without reason. Independent candidates are harder to deal with. I have previously done a video on that topic, and I'll leave a link to it in the description area below this video on YouTube. And so I believe we're all waiting with bated breath for Thursday, because Thursday is going to tell us a lot of things. It is going to confirm, hopefully, a lot of things. If dirty tricks don't win the day. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.